I don't know who the Yahoo was who put down this lesson for this morning to do a lot of reading, but I'm going to have trouble. My mic is on, yes. But we'll do all right. I got him. Okay. We're talking about knowing our adversary, Satan. And last week we stressed a couple points. We noticed that Satan is not God. He's not omnipotent. He doesn't know everything. He's not omnipresent. We noticed that he had a beginning. Notice that he was a created spiritual being, most likely an angel, perhaps even an archangel like Michael was. He was given free moral choice, and he chose incorrectly when he lifted up in pride and fell. What we don't know is when that happened, nor the precise circumstances about it. It's just not revealed to us of those things. And unlike other angels who fell, who are now reserved in chains of darkness, Satan is permitted to roam about the earth. I think as we get into the lesson next week, we'll talk more about that idea and that concept. Today's lesson, we're going to focus on his actions in the Old Testament. There's over 50 references to the term adversary in the Old Testament. 13 of these actually refer to Satan. Okay? So there are a lot. We're not going to cover all 13 of those this morning. Okay? We're going to cover a few. We'll look at some that are very familiar to us. We'll look at some that are not so familiar to us. And we'll talk about them. Of course, to begin with, the very first one we want to look at is Genesis chapter 3. So if you would, go ahead and turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 3. Remember Genesis chapter 1, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Created in 6 days, he rested on the seventh day. Verse 31 ends that chapter with God saw of his creation that it was good. Not only that it was good, it was very good. Okay? Genesis chapter 2 gets into a little more detail about how the creation of man took place. God first made Adam, caused the animals to pass before him, and decided that there was not a suitable helpmeet for Adam. So then he created woman. Okay? Created Eve. And he caused Adam to fall asleep, took a rib from his side, and created Eve from the rib. And that's where we pick up Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Okay. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. I believe it's verse 15 of chapter 2. Adam is given the task to keep the garden. Okay, he's allowed to take of any of the fruits of the trees that are in the garden, except one, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? The one thing he should not do, or could not do, is presented to him. Okay? He's not supposed to do that one thing. I wish there was just one thing that I wasn't supposed to do in life, because I could avoid that one thing. But unfortunately, there are several other things that come with it. And the knowledge of good and evil is the result of that. Satan's lie. He hits them right between the eyes. God had said to Adam and to Eve, the day that you eat that fruit of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, you shall surely die. Satan hits them right up front. It's a lie. And
then that first verse you read, it uses the word subtle.
yes,
The New King James calls it cunning. And I think that's better
right.
because he's definitely cunning.
Cunning, yes. Yes. Hit them right up front that God had lied to them, right? That it wasn't going to happen. Okay? It happens today, folks. We're out there in the world and people hit us right up front with lies. We believe Satan's lies over God's truth. Why is that? I thought about last week talking about the idea of the book. You won't actually find a book written by Satan. Okay, you'll find books written by men that kind of twist and change the truth a little bit, okay, that are in effect carrying out Satan's deeds. But you won't find a book written by Satan. Why is that? Because to write a book, you have to write down truths, right? You can't do that. He doesn't know truth. Okay, it's a lie. Okay? That's the first thing. He lied to them. And then he issued the challenge. Okay, you're being deprived, right? Because if you eat this fruit, you're going to be as gods. You'll be like God himself. Okay? Not just some caretaker of the garden. Okay? And that's how he went to Eve. Okay? Well, verses 6 and 7. Well, I'm not quite there yet. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 says, love not the world nor the things that are in the world. Verse 16 says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but of the world. Okay? Those are the three things we get from John, 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. See how they play out in verses 6 and 7. And when the woman saw the tree was good for food, lust of the flesh, yeah, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, lust of the eyes, okay, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And of course, the last step is the pride of life. I often wondered, as in my weird times, I guess, did 1 John chapter 2, 16 come as a result of this temptation? Or is that the way sin works all the time, and this temptation is just a presentation of it? As we go throughout life, we see that the forms of temptation come through these three avenues. Not every single temptation touches all three, but every temptation has at least one of these attributes involved with it. It was good for food, it's pleasant to the eyes, desired to make one wise. Pride of life. Of course, they took and ate. God comes walking through the garden. I left out a little part about them making the fig leaves and hiding themselves, right? God comes walking through the garden, and he's calling for Adam. Okay. The way the story sounds, it's like God doesn't know. But God does know. Okay? He knows. Okay? And he asked Adam, why have you hidden yourself? And Adam says, because we were naked and afraid. And right away, God knows they've taken of something they shouldn't have taken. They've eaten the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay? Why have you done this? She made me do it. Why did it? The serpent made me do it, you know. And so on and forth. I mean, we've all seen Bill Cosby's little rendition of that, right? And how we like to pass guilt on. But guilt is personal. It's involved here. There's a curse that's placed upon the serpent. There's a curse placed upon Satan. There's a curse that's placed upon Adam. A curse placed upon Eve. It's
Well, I'm not usurping what you said, but that was a Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it.
Yeah, Flip Wilson said the devil made me do it. Yeah.
The reason I bring it, you said Bill Cosby, I don't recall Bill Cosby, he's done enough.
Well, Bill Cosby, well, I didn't explain it further. Bill Cosby does a little skit where he talks about the kids in the house and they keep blaming each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the youngest.
Can I throw something else? I don't want to get ahead of you guys, but
Right.
one of the things that's always astonished me was, and when we read this, you just stated, she made me do it. No one accepts responsibility. There's two cousins here, responsibility and accountability. When I was a commanding officer, that was one of the things I spent a lot of time. I also spent some time, I'm not a lawyer, but there's mitigating and extenuating circumstances in every event. But one of the things I want to make certain that my men understood, we're responsible for our own action. You can't sublet that.
Right.
No one can live your life for you. And whatever actions you do, you're going to be held accountable for it. We tend to forget. But we live in a time now that nothing's new, as Solomon said under the sun. It's just so more pronounced, it seems to me. Everybody else's fault. We don't take responsibility for anything. But we're going to be held accountable, if not in this life, in the life to come. I just want to get that little bit of sermon out there right quick.
No, I appreciate that. That's exactly what happens here in this passage. Okay, the accountability is passed on to Adam, it's passed on to Eve, it's passed on to the serpent. There's also a promise that's made, and that's the promise of Christ coming. That we have there, the redemption plan for redeeming man from sin. Okay, and that's also made in this passage. Let's go to the next act, Genesis chapter 4. I call it Cain's sin. This passage is an interesting topic because Satan is not mentioned by name in this passage, but his stamp is all over it. It's all over it. 1 John chapter 3, verse 12 describes Cain as being of the wicked one, one of the wicked ones. John chapter 8, verse 44, Christ describes the devil as being a murderer from the beginning. Okay, as being a murderer from the beginning. True, Adam and Eve partook of the fruit and death entered the world as a result of that. But also in this act here, there's actually a physical death that takes place with Abel. Let's read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 4. And Adam knew his wife, she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man child, a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of ground. And it came, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought forth the fruit of the ground, an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. I hate it when it skips pages with my notes. Abel's offering was accepted. Cain was not accepted. We read from Hebrews chapter 11:4 and also 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. Cain was not righteous in his offering. It was not what God had commanded, what God expected. We know from Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22 that all things are sanctified by blood, right? Without shedding blood, there is no remission. Okay, so God requires a blood sacrifice. Okay, and that's what he asked for. Okay, Cain didn't bring blood; he brought the fruits of the ground. Okay, so he didn't give God what God had asked for. Okay, so he was not righteous in his offering. Therefore, his offering was not accepted. Because of that, we could do a whole lesson on that, but we'll suffice it to stop there. Verses 6 and 7 of chapter 4 It says, "And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door." Pay attention to this last phrase. "And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him." Okay. Cain became angry. God said, if you do well, you'll be accepted. Cain could have gone back, brought the things that God had asked for, and done an offering, and he would have been accepted. Okay, his offering would have been accepted at that point. He didn't. He was angry. Okay? God again asked, drop down a little bit too far. God's warning to Cain is that sin lieth at the door, and then he kind of impersonates or assigns a person to sin, right? He's at the door, right? His desire is, but you should rule over him, okay? Okay? Satan is brought into that picture. Okay, so he's equating sin with Satan, the idea here. Satan's not mentioned by name, he's mentioned as a pronoun, his desire. Okay? We'll actually get into more of this when we go to the next example, talking about Job, but Satan was there at Cain's door. His desire was to rule over Cain. Cain was to do well, okay, and rule over Satan. How does the story go? Does he? No, he doesn't. They're in the field together, right? Well, actually, the passage talks about, I think the next verse, that he talks to his brother Abel and kind of get the idea that maybe they made up a little bit, saying that's okay, I don't know. I'm reading into the passage, it's not there. He just talked to Abel. But they're in the field together, right? And then Cain rises up and slays his brother Abel, kills him, okay? Hides him in the ground. God comes and asks, "Where's thy brother? I'm not my brother's keeper. What have you done? His blood cries to me from the ground." And then the curse is placed upon Cain, who's driven out from mankind, has to live as a vagabond on the earth. Okay, so about 20 minutes. Needed that to be done in about 10 minutes. Let's go to Job. Job chapter 1. I am flying through these, by the way. And so far you've been good to listen, but if there's comments and such, please raise your hand or something. Let me know. We'll talk about them. I want to cover, we got Job, we got the rebellious Israelites, we got David, and we got the case of Ahab and Micaiah. So there's a lot of ground to cover. They're all in different places. But Job is one of those. I mean, I've taught a lesson on Job, right? A whole quarter on Job. And it's hard to, actually probably more than a quarter, it actually ended up a couple quarters. It's really hard to do it justice without opening up the entire book. But we're going to try to cover just a few things, a few high points from each of these. And Job is chapters 1 and 2. Okay, it's Job chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1, talk about Job. We find that he's a man of great wealth. Okay? He's a religious man. How religious is he? Verse 5. "And it was so when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them, all, for Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually." How righteous was he? He was worried that his sons and daughters may have committed some sin, so he offered a sacrifice on their behalf. Okay, he was very conscientious. He was righteous. He was wealthy. Satan's challenge is in verse 9 through 11. Verses 9 through 11. God asked Satan, where have you been? Satan says, I've been wandering from to and fro on the earth. Have you considered my servant Job? God says. Satan says, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Here's God's allowance in verse 12. The Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy hand, is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. This is how evil and how diabolical Satan is. Okay? His challenge with Job is that he's serving God because God has built a hedge around him. He's given him all these blessings. Take it away and he'll curse God and die. Okay?
Warren,
Yes.
along with what you're saying there, Joel being a faithful man of God, in today's time, think about things when you're trying to do everything you can to be a faithful Christian. And it seems like there's times when we all go through trials and you wonder if maybe I'm doing something wrong because of maybe the stress that's put upon you. You're trying to do everything you can to get up and fall. Even like Job, things you know is going to be taken away from him. Job's doing everything he can to be a righteous.
Right.
I'm just relating that to today's life and times, the things that we as Christians may have to suffer through.
Yeah. There's 36, 37 chapters in Job dealing with that subject. That's a good point, though. It is a good point. Because we get, sometimes we like to think we're doing everything and then something happens and it seems like a challenge. This is how evil Satan is, okay? He could have just taken one thing from Job. He could have taken maybe a couple things from Job. He took everything he could from Job. He took all his cattle, he took all his servants, he took all his sheep, took every one of his sons and daughters, wiped them out. At the end of chapter 1, Job is left with nothing. Okay? Well, the one thing he's left with is probably a curse. No, I shouldn't say that. But his wife. Yes. And I guess 3 servants that were left alive to come tell him of the things that happened. Okay? But I got a feeling they told him and went on. Get away from us, you got bad karma or something like that. He did everything within his power to just take away all that Job had. Everything that God had granted him, the leeway that God had granted him, he used against Job. Okay? To Eddie's point, the same thing happens to us today. Okay? Everything Satan's allowed to do to us, he'll do to us. Okay? There's an important passage that we find, and I knew as soon as I started on it, I'd lose it. 1 Corinthians 13, or no, 2 Corinthians 13 talks about that we're not tempted above that we're able to bear, but with every temptation God provides an escape for us. Okay? There is controls, there are boundaries set upon Satan with each individual person. Okay? Now, Job in chapter 1, everything's taken away from him. Okay? It's all gone. Job's response, yes, Brother Rufus.
I don't really know what to hear, but someone indicated, well, he still had his wife, and that's true. But he also had his life.
Yes.
And I remember about Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. There's always tomorrow. So Job had opportunity to regain all that he loved, because as long as he did not forsake God Almighty.
Yeah,
We've always got another opportunity to do right.
that's true. It is true. Yes. I like how Job chapter 1 verse 22 ends the passage. It says, in all this Job sinned not, Lord charged God foolishly. Okay? Chapter 2 comes along. He's got his life. He's got his health, actually, until chapter 2. Okay? It's kind of interesting there that Job is no longer wealthy. He has nothing. He is poor, but he has his integrity. And God asked Satan again, have you considered my servant Job? Okay? You've done all those things to him that you said would happen, but he's still faithful to me. Verses 4 through 6. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and I curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Okay? Satan was allowed to do anything to Job physically that he could. Okay? Satan's challenge to God was, okay, yeah, so I was wrong. Satan didn't admit that, right? He can't handle the truth. Okay? Sounds like a movie, doesn't it? But, Satan does not abide in truth. He's a liar. He's a deceiver. Okay? He says that, he ignores God's statement there. He says, yeah, but he's still healthy. He's still alive. You afflict him physically, he'll curse you then. Okay? Another argument. I used to work with a guy, I called him the rabbit guy. Because whenever you're in a discussion with this guy and you talk to him about a particular point, once you get the point resolved, guess what happens? Another rabbit runs on the table. Go down this road now. He changes the subject, right? Doesn't want to face the consequences, the actions of what he said earlier, the truth. Okay? And that's the way this Satan is. Okay? God, if you'll do everything physically to him, he'll curse you then and die. Okay? Oh, God allows him to do everything he can except one parameter. Don't kill him. Do not kill him. That's the only parameter that's placed upon Satan. Only restriction that's placed upon Satan with Job. He gives him a boil, right? Is it one boil? No. Sole is at foot, top of his head. He was just one big boil walking around. Several boils, actually. Festering. His three friends come up to see him, right? They're looking at him, way off. Who is that guy? They don't even know him. Okay? It's hard to recognize. I've been in a few, unfortunately the ones I'm thinking of all involve death, but a few friends of mine or acquaintances that I've known that have died tragically due to certain circumstances. Remember, actually, most of the times we keep the casket closed, right? But sometimes it's open, and seeing some of the disfigurement that's caused there, is that really John? You have the doubt because, it's pretty close to, what he looked like, what you remember him being like, but still different, a lot different. They didn't recognize Job. They lifted up their voices and wept. They sat with him for a week before any person would ask a question, would say anything. He was physically touched and harmed. The rest of the book is a discourse between Job and his friends, trying to explain, trying to understand why this happened. Okay? I understand his friends say, you've done something wrong. Job says, no, I've not. And he appeals to God, why has this happened to me, and all this stuff. Okay? At the end of the book, God appears and explains to Job that he can't understand it. It's not revealed to him. God says, I'm God. And Because actual God's argument to Job is to demonstrate who he is. Okay? God is the ruler of the universe. He's the creator of all things. He allows it to happen this way. He allows it to happen this way. Job wasn't there when he created the worlds. I like how Job ends his comment in chapter 42, verses 1 through 6. I'm hoping that none of us ever have to face the challenges that Job faced, okay? But I do know that each of us face our own challenges, okay? And Satan challenges us. Well, actually, it's 10 o'clock. When we get over there, we'll actually talk about maybe Zechariah's passage in Joshua and how Satan is. But verses 1 through 6, then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered that I understand not. Things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Hear, I beseech thee, and I will speak. And I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. God is God. He's pure. He's holy. Hopefully, as we go through our trials and come through them successfully, we'll have the same attitude that Job has and repent and be acceptable to God. Okay? And receive his mercy. Time is kind of short. I did have the comment here about the rebellious Israelites. I think we'll go ahead and pass over that. Let's turn over to 2 Samuel chapter, 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1. First Chronicles 21:1. Yes, he does. And it's actually, I'm going to, I hope you all are of strong faith this morning. I need to put my glasses on so I can tell if I'm looking at First Chronicles or Second Chronicles. Okay. First Chronicles 21:1. We'll read verse 2 as well. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. And David said to Joab and to the rulers of the people, Go number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring the number of them to me that I may know it. Okay. I wanted to read 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 1. This is what it says. And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, Go number Israel and Judah. Okay? I had it typed out. Which was it? Did Satan stand up against Israel and move David to number them? Or was it the anger of the Lord? Were they in cahoots? Did they work together? No, both are correct. Satan stood against Israel and moved David to number Israel. Guess what that is? Guess what happened there? What did David do? It's a three-letter word.
Was he proud possibly of all those he was leading as king?
Yeah, that's why he's doing it, yes. That's why he's doing it. But what was the action that David did? It's a three-letter word. It's easy. It's S-I-N. He sinned. What does sin do against God? It brings the wrath of God, right? He's angry. Satan moved, as he stood against Israel, he moved David to number Israel, brought God's wrath against David, okay, against Israel, because David was lifted up with pride. I wrote here, First Chronicles explains the impetus behind God's anger. David gave in to Satan and was lifted up with pride to go number the people. Note Joab's response to David, we'll go through verses 3 through 4. Before we get there, let me tell you about this guy Joab. Okay? Joab was the commander of David's army. Joab, thank you. Yeah, I left out a letter. Joab was the commander of David's army. Okay? There was Asher. I've already forgotten his name. But there was the leader of Solomon's army, right? He comes and makes a peace with David. Okay? Abner. Okay? Joab kills him in the time of peace. Okay? There's a distant cousin of David, who David puts him in the place of Joab to lead his army because of Joab's evil misdeeds. Yeah? Joab comes up to him as if he's a friend, grabs him by the beard, and sticks him in the abdomen with his sword. Kills him. That's who this Joab is. Okay? He's a wicked guy. He's an evil guy. When Solomon comes into reign, he brings up the idea of how Joab can no longer be commander of an army, and he needs to live a peaceful life. Joab does. He tries to incite a civil war, okay, with David's other son against Solomon. And then he finally slew against the altar. But in this passage, and Joab answered, "The Lord make his people 100 times so many more as they be. But my Lord, the king, are they not all my Lord's servants? Why then doth my Lord require this thing? Why will he be a cause of trespass to Israel?" Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Wherefore Joab departed and went throughout all Israel and came to Jerusalem. We'll find later on that Joab leaves out the tribe of Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, but he recognizes it as his sin. And of course, we know it was very displeasing to God, verse 7. David realizes what he's done. He repents. Gad comes in, gives him 3 options. Okay, David says, "Let me fall in the hands of the Lord," because he's a merciful God. Okay, God sends the angel throughout the land of Israel, destroying the people. Okay, 70,000 men of Israel died because of David's sin. 70,000 people are killed because of his sin. At the threshing floor of Ornan, the angel stops. He's there. Okay? God says it's enough. David goes up. Okay? He ends up buying the threshing floor. He ends up buying the oxen, the wood, and makes an offering there to God, Jehovah. Okay? And the end of the judgment occurs. It stopped. It ceases. It's prevented. Okay? We know that place, Ornan's threshing floor, is the later home of the temple that Solomon will build. Okay? And if you believe, which I tend to agree, that the Dome of the Rock, that place in Jerusalem now, is the same site that this occurred. The one man's sin led to 70,000 people dying. Okay, let's go to Micaiah and Ahab. 1 Kings chapter 22. We got 4 minutes. I won't get to wrap up. Joshua. We'll paraphrase this passage pretty quickly. Ahab and, Jehoshaphat is a good king from Judah. At this time, the 10 northern tribes are separated from the 2 southern tribes. Ahab is the king in Israel, and Jehoshaphat is the king in Jerusalem. Okay? He's a good king. Okay? He's wanting to get peace with his fellow brothers in the north. So he comes up and he meets with Ahab. Okay? Ahab presents the challenge. He says, don't you know that Ramoth, okay, but the king of Syria has it now. Go up with me. If you kind of the challenge, if you really want to be my friend, let's go to battle together, okay? And fight and conquer and pull this city back to me, okay? Joab says, well, is there a prophet of the Lord here that can inquire for us, okay? Ahab calls in all the prophets of the Lord, right? No, not a single one. He calls in the prophets of Baal. You may remember the guys from 1 Kings chapter 18 that cut themselves and cried when they were killed and wiped out. But then some others rose up again. Okay? But he calls them in, and they're all prophesying. They even have this one guy, Zedekiah. He makes horns of iron. Okay, and he's running around. And so with these, Ahab will push the king of Assyria out, king of Syria out of the land. Okay? Joab's no, I guess, idiot is the right way to phrase it, but he knows these are not the true prophets of God. Where's the altar? Okay? Where's the sacrifice, the inquiry that they should be making? It's not there. He knows that. Okay? He asked Ahab, isn't there one prophet of God in Israel? There is one. His name is Micaiah. Okay? Ahab says, he doesn't like me. All he says is evil against me. Call him. Okay? The guy goes to call Micaiah and says, hey, now listen. All these guys are saying that going up and fight, going up and fight. You going up and fight. Tell him that. Tell him that. That's all you have to do. Tell him that. Okay? Okay, Micaiah comes in. He's shackled and all that because he was actually in prison. They bring him there. And he says, go up and fight. Okay? And you'll win. And Ahab says, have I not told you to prophesy the truth to me? Okay? So then Micaiah does tell him the truth. God's meeting with some spirits, right? How do I entice Ahab to go up to Ramoth Gilead and die there? Okay? Spirits come forth, they suggest things. Finally, the lying spirit. Depending on your view of whether, the commentators' views, some assign this to Satan himself, some assign it to just a demon as a lying spirit. Okay? I personally think it's Satan. It says, I'll go up, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouths of his prophets. I'll tell him to go up, fight, that he'll conquer, but he'll actually fall there. God says, you will succeed. Sends him out. He goes forth, he lies to the prophets. The long story short of it, Jehoshaphat goes into battle dressed as the king. They see him, they start fighting against him. The Syrians see him, they start fighting against him. Jehoshaphat is not a warrior king. Guess what he does? He runs, right? He flees. He ultimately will die. He gets killed. But perchance, Ahab dressed as a regular warrior, someone fires a bow and they hit Ahab. He perishes there in that land. Okay? Satan accomplishes his deed. Okay? The bell rang, actually in the stoppage time. It's not like soccer, you get injured, you keep going. But we're through with this lesson. But think about these thoughts next week. We're going to talk about Satan's value of human life next week. I think from these examples that we've talked about, you realize he has no value for human life. Okay? Those people that think they're serving him for some special gift, some special blessing, find out just the opposite. Hopefully they find out before it's too late, but unfortunately, a lot of people, it is too late when they find out. They wake up and it's Judgment Day. Okay? Next week, we'll go over Satan's value or lack thereof for human life. Thank you guys and have a good evening.